People like you do not own yachts, Gerald Whitmore said. He said it on the main dock of Crescent Bay Marina, with sunlight flashing on white hulls, restaurant guests watching from the upper deck, two deckhands frozen beside a fuel cart, and a black man standing calmly beside a dark blue yacht that was already tied to slip A1. Malcolm Pierce looked at the rope in his hand. Then he looked at Gerald. Behind him, the yacht name shone in polished silver letters. Miriam Grace. Naomi Brooks, the young dock coordinator, held a tablet against her chest. On the screen, the booking was clear. Owner, Malcolm Pierce. Slip A1 confirmed. Insurance verified. Dockage paid. Still, Gerald stepped closer and pointed toward the water. I do not know whose boat you borrowed, he said, but this slip is reserved for real owners. The dock went quiet. Captain Samuel Reed, the old marine mechanic near the service shed, slowly lifted his head. Malcolm did not raise his voice. Are you sure you want to say that on my port? Gerald stared at him. Your port? Then he laughed. 1 hour later, when the Port Authority opened the acquisition file and Elaine Porter placed the operating rights agreement on the conference table, that laugh would die in Gerald's throat. By then, he would not be explaining one insult. He would be explaining why he refused service to the man whose company had just taken control of the marina, the fuel dock, the repair yard, the waterfront restaurants, and the contract that kept Gerald in his office. But at 9:17 that morning, Gerald still believed Crescent Bay belonged to people like him. Crescent Bay Marina sat inside the prettiest part of the harbor. The water was deep blue. The docks were freshly sealed. White yachts lined the slips like expensive teeth. Golf carts moved luggage past planters of seagrass. At the dockside restaurant, guests in linen shirts lifted glasses toward the morning sun. Beyond the marina, fishing boats worked the older pier, closer to the diesel smell, the gulls, and the men who knew the harbor before it became beautiful enough for investors. Malcolm Pierce entered slowly from the outer channel. He was alone at the helm. The Miriam Grace was not the largest yacht in Crescent Bay. It did not need to be. Its dark blue hull was clean, its lines were sharp, and its engine moved with the quiet confidence of a vessel maintained by someone who respected the water more than attention. Malcolm wore a simple white linen shirt, dark trousers, and old boat shoes with salt marks near the seams. No bodyguards, no crew in matching shirts, no champagne, no one carrying his bag. That was the point. He wanted to see the marina before it knew who he was. Pierce Harbor Group had spent 8 months negotiating the commercial control package for Crescent Bay Port. The purchase included the marina concession, the fuel dock rights, the repair yard lease, the small cargo pier, 2 waterfront restaurant leases, and the operating service contract Gerald Whitmore had managed for 15 years. The final transition meeting was scheduled for noon at the Port Authority office. Malcolm had come early for one reason. He wanted to watch the dock behave without a warning. A port tells the truth when no one important is expected. As he approached slip A1, Naomi Brooks saw the reservation on her tablet and stood straighter. Miriam Grace, owner Malcolm Pierce. Slip A1, arrival window 9:15. She had reviewed the booking the night before. Everything was in order. Registration, insurance, payment, marina rules acknowledgement, emergency contact, vessel dimensions, fuel request, shore power request. She picked up the dock radio. Miriam Grace arriving at A1, lines ready. Gerald's voice cracked back through the radio. Hold that. Naomi frowned. Hold what? I said hold. Gerald came out of the marina office wearing a navy blazer, white trousers, and the expression of a man who believed the docks were an extension of his private dining room. He had built a career on greeting wealthy boat owners by name and treating everyone else as a possible mistake. He stopped beside Naomi and looked at the approaching yacht. Who was aboard? Naomi checked the tablet. Owner listed as Malcolm Pierce. Gerald's eyes narrowed. Pierce. Yes. Do we know him? The documents are verified. That is not what I asked. Naomi lowered the tablet slightly. It is what matters. Gerald turned his head just enough to warn her. Do not start today. The Miriam Grace eased into the slip with steady control. Malcolm stepped from the helm, crossed the deck, and tossed the first line around the cleat himself. He moved like someone who had grown up with rope burns, engine heat, and wet boards under his feet. Not like a man performing ownership. Like a man who understood boats before he could afford one. Samuel Reed saw that from the service shed. He knew the difference. A rich man often stepped from a yacht and looked for someone to handle the dock line. A harbor man tied the line before talking. Malcolm secured the stern line, stepped onto the dock, and looked toward Naomi. Good morning. Naomi moved forward. Good morning, Mr. Pierce. Welcome to Crescent Bay. I have your reservation at Slip A1. Before she could continue, Gerald stepped between them. You work for the owner. Malcolm looked at him. I am the owner. Gerald gave a small laugh. Of the boat, yes. Gerald looked past him toward the cockpit, as if the real owner might appear from below deck. Where is your crew? I came alone. Owners at Crescent Bay do not usually tie their own lines. Malcolm looked down at the cleat. Owners who know the sea do. Samuel smiled faintly from the service shed. Gerald did not. He extended one hand toward Naomi. Give me the tablet. Naomi hesitated. Gerald did not repeat himself. She handed it over. He looked at the screen and frowned as if the words had personally offended him. Slip A1 is a premium berth. Malcolm said, I know, I booked it. Gerald scrolled. There may be a system issue. What issue? Gerald looked him over again. Shirt, shoes, no watch that flashed, no crew, no visible need to impress anyone. This slip is typically used by fully verified clients. Naomi spoke carefully. He is verified. Gerald said, Naomi. Just her name, enough to make her stop. Malcolm noticed that too. He noticed how Gerald used names like hands around throats, softly, privately, with practice. Gerald turned back to him. I need proof of ownership. The Marina has it. I need to see it. Malcolm looked down the dock. A white yacht owner had just arrived at Slip A3 with 2 guests and a dog in a pink life vest. A dockhand carried their bags. Gerald raised one hand in a warm greeting. He did not ask for papers. Malcolm looked back. Do you ask every owner for proof after the system verifies them? Gerald's smile disappeared. I ask when something does not look right. The words moved across the dock. Naomi's eyes dropped. Samuel set down his wrench. A deckhand looked away. Malcolm's voice remained level. What does not look right? Gerald stepped closer. Do not make this difficult. It became difficult when you ignored your own booking record. Gerald's cheeks reddened. Listen to me. I do not know if you are delivering this boat, cleaning it, or trying to impress someone who is not here yet. But Crescent Bay is not a place for performances. Naomi whispered. Gerald. He turned sharply. Do not correct me in front of guests. Malcolm looked at the restaurant deck above them. Guests were watching now. That was the cruelty of it. Gerald wanted an audience because he believed the audience belonged to him. He pointed at the Miriam Grace. I want the vessel removed from this slip until ownership is confirmed by management, Malcolm said. Management already confirmed it. I am management. Not for much longer. Gerald laughed once. There it is, the threat. No, Malcolm said. The notice. Gerald looked at the fuel dock attendant. Do not connect shore power. Do not authorize fuel. Do not issue lounge access. If he refuses to leave, call Harbor Patrol. Naomi moved forward. You cannot deny shore power after docking without a safety reason. The reservation is active, and the vessel is stable. Gerald snapped. You will follow my instruction. Samuel Reed walked closer, wiping his hands on a cloth. Mr. Whitmore. Gerald turned. What now? Samuel nodded toward the yacht. She is already in position. Wind is shifting from the west. If you force a single operator to move without dock support in this traffic, that is bad seamanship and bad management. Gerald looked at him with open contempt. I do not need an old mechanic teaching me how to run my marina. Samuel stopped. Not because he had no answer, because he had heard that tone for 30 years in different coats. Malcolm looked at Samuel. Captain Reed. Samuel's eyes sharpened. Only people who knew the old harbor called him that. Gerald noticed the exchange and became more irritated. Enough! You have 2 minutes to move this boat. Malcolm reached into his pocket and took out his phone. He did not call Harbor Patrol. He called Elaine Porter. She answered quickly. Malcolm, he looked at Gerald. Activate the Crescent file. I want Port Authority in session within the hour. Preserve marina booking logs, fee tables, cancellation records, camera footage, fuel dock records, and all manual overrides tied to Gerald Whitmore. Elaine was silent for 1 beat. Did something happen? Malcolm looked at the main dock, the people watching. Naomi pale beside him, Samuel standing near the service shed, and Gerald smiling like the dock itself supported him. Yes. Gerald refused a verified booking, denied shore power, threatened Harbor Patrol, and said people like me do not own yachts. Elaine's voice changed. Is Naomi Brooks present? Malcolm looked at her name tag. Yes. Samuel Reed. Yes. Good. Do not leave the marina. I am on my way. Malcolm ended the call. Gerald crossed his arms. Very dramatic. Malcolm said nothing. Gerald stepped closer again, his voice low enough to sound private, but loud enough for Naomi to hear. People like you always think one phone call changes the rules. Malcolm looked at him. No. Rules changed before I arrived. You just did not read them. Gerald turned toward the marina office. I am writing this up as a safety refusal. Naomi followed him. Gerald, that would be false. He kept walking. False is a word people use when they do not have authority to sign. The sentence stopped her. Malcolm heard it. Samuel heard it. The dock camera above the fuel kiosk recorded it. Inside the marina office, Gerald sat at his desk and opened the incident system. Customer unable to verify vessel ownership. Customer refused management instruction. Customer created disruption on main dock. Service denied for safety concern. Naomi stood across from him, her hands tight around the tablet. None of that is accurate. Gerald kept typing. It will be accurate when I submit it. She stared at him. That is not how records work. Gerald looked up. That is exactly how records work, when children stop pretending every form is a moral document. He clicked save. The system issued an incident number, CBM 942. Naomi watched the screen. She knew the system kept version history. She also knew Gerald knew it, and did not care. He had survived complaints before, because the people he hurt rarely had the time, money, or status to force a review. Visiting boat owners left angry and never returned. Fishermen kept their heads down. Staff needed jobs. Mechanics needed contracts. Gerald did not hide every lie. He relied on nobody powerful caring enough to read it. Naomi quietly took a screenshot of the original booking, then the denial entry, then the timestamp. Outside, Malcolm stood beside the Miriam Grace. The insult had landed harder than he had shown. Not because Gerald doubted the yacht. Malcolm had been doubted by better-dressed men in larger rooms. It hurt because of the way Gerald said work on them, as if work was shame, as if the hands that kept boats alive were beneath the hands that signed Marina checks. Malcolm looked at the old rope coiled near the stern. His father had taught him that a clean knot was a promise. Tie it badly, and someone else paid later. When Malcolm was 12, he watched his father, Joseph Pierce, repair an engine on a yacht twice the size of their apartment. Joseph came up from the engine room with grease on his forearms and sweat on his shirt. Before he could explain the repair, the yacht owner waved him away. "Do not stand on the upper deck too long," the man said. "Guests are arriving." Joseph said nothing. That night at the kitchen table, Malcolm asked why he stayed quiet. His father untied and retied a small piece of rope in his hands. "Son, the sea does not ask who is rich before it lifts a boat. People build gates on water because they are afraid the water does not know their names." Malcolm had remembered every word. Years later, when Pierce Harbor Group bought port after port, he did not buy them to become the man on the upper deck. He bought them because the gates had become too comfortable. Samuel Reed walked up slowly and stood beside him. "You know my name?" Malcolm turned. "My father knew yours." Samuel studied his face. "Joseph Pierce, boy." Malcolm nodded. Samuel's breath caught softly. "I should have seen it." "You saw enough." Samuel looked toward Gerald's office. "Your father fixed half the engines in this harbor before Crescent Bay became a place people dressed up to ignore labor." Malcolm looked at the water. "He told me the harbor remembered more than the owners did." Samuel smiled sadly. He was right. From the office window, Gerald saw them talking and mistook the silence for weakness. He picked up the radio. "Security to main dock." A guard answered. "Go ahead. Escort the individual from slip A1 off Marina property if he will not depart." Naomi turned. "Gerald, do not do this." He kept the radio near his mouth. "And inform Harbor Patrol we may have a trespass issue." Malcolm heard the radio call through the open office door. He did not move. A golf cart rolled toward the dock with 2 security staff aboard. Restaurant guests leaned over the rail now. Phones appeared in hands. A child near the fuel dock asked his mother what was happening. Naomi stepped out of the office quickly. "Mr. Pierce, I am sorry." Malcolm looked at her. "Save everything." She swallowed. "I already started." "Good." Gerald came out behind her. "That will not help you, Naomi." She turned. "I hope you are wrong." He smiled. "I am rarely wrong on this dock." A black sedan pulled up near the Port Authority gate. Then another. Elaine Porter stepped out of the first car, carrying a leather document case. Victoria Shaw, the Port Authority representative, stepped out of the second, with 2 staff members behind her. Gerald's smile faltered for the first time. Victoria walked down the dock with controlled urgency. Gerald called out, "Victoria, this is being handled." She did not answer him. Elaine reached Malcolm first. "Are you all right?" He looked at Gerald. "Not the question yet." Elaine nodded. Then she turned to Victoria. "We need the conference room, now." Gerald forced a laugh. "For what?" Elaine looked at him. "For the operating rights you apparently did not read?" The Marina office conference room opened at 10:26. Gerald entered, still pretending he was the complainant. Naomi entered with the tablet. Samuel entered slowly, smelling of diesel and old rope. Victoria Shaw sat at the head of the table, tense and careful. Elaine placed her document case in front of Malcolm and opened it. Gerald spoke first. Before this becomes theatrical, let me state plainly that an individual arrived with a vessel whose ownership was not properly confirmed and created a disturbance when asked to comply with Marina standards. Elaine removed one page. The vessel ownership was confirmed yesterday at 1642 through the Marina booking system. Gerald blinked. Elaine removed another page. Payment cleared, insurance verified, dockage confirmed, shore power requested, fuel service requested, slip A1 assigned. Gerald looked at Naomi. She held his stare this time. Elaine removed a third page. Then she said, "The real question is why a verified owner was denied service, why a false incident report was created, and why the acting Marina manager made a discriminatory statement on port property during an active transition period." Gerald leaned back. Transition period. Elaine placed the main file on the table. Crescent Bay Port Commercial Control Transfer, Pierce Harbor Group, Marina Concession, Fuel Dock, Repair Yard, Restaurant Leases, Small Cargo Pier, Operating Services Agreement, Emergency Replacement Rights for Discrimination, Fee Irregularity, Safety Risk, or Falsified Incident Reporting. Gerald looked at the page, then at Malcolm, then back at the page. For the first time, the dock manager had no sentence ready. Malcolm sat quietly across from him. The man Gerald had called a trespasser. The man he believed could not own a yacht. The man whose father had once repaired engines on the same harbor while rich owners looked away. Elaine turned one final page and slid it across the table. Authorized Controlling Officer, Malcolm Pierce. Gerald's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Outside the conference room window, the Miriam Grace sat calmly in slip A1, lines secure, hull shining in the morning light. And the port Gerald thought he controlled had just begun to answer to the man he tried to remove from it. Inside the Marina conference room, nobody moved for several seconds. Gerald Whitmore stared at the page Elaine Porter had placed before him. Authorized Controlling Officer, Malcolm Pierce. His eyes went from the printed name to Malcolm's face, then back to the page, as if he expected the letters to rearrange themselves into something safer. They did not. Victoria Shaw sat at the head of the table with her hands folded, but her expression had changed. 10 minutes earlier, she had arrived prepared to manage a service complaint. Now she was looking at a port concession crisis, a false incident report, a discrimination claim, and a controlling operator whose first direct experience at Crescent Bay had been public humiliation. Elaine Porter spoke first.
"Mr. Whitmore, before anyone in this room says another word, the booking record, incident report, dock camera footage, radio traffic, fuel request, shore power denial, and manual access entries are under preservation." Gerald blinked. Preservation. Yes. He forced a small laugh. For a misunderstanding at a dock. Naomi Brooks looked down at her tablet. Samuel Reed looked at the old rope bracelet on Malcolm's wrist. Malcolm said nothing. That silence bothered Gerald more than anger would have. Anger could be framed as instability. Anger could be written into a report. Anger could become the excuse for every unfair thing Gerald had already decided to do. But silence gave Gerald nothing to use. Victoria turned to Malcolm. "Mr. Pierce, did you come here today as part of the transition inspection?" Malcolm nodded. "Yes." Gerald sat up quickly. "That was not disclosed to Marina management," Elaine answered. "The agreement permits unannounced service review during transition if operational integrity is in question." Gerald looked at her. Operational integrity. Elaine opened another page. Fee discrepancies, manual cancellations, complaints from local fishermen, labor concerns from dock staff, uneven application of access requirements. Victoria's jaw tightened. Those were preliminary items.
Malcolm finally spoke. This morning made them specific. Gerald pointed at him. So this was a trap. Malcolm looked at him calmly. No, a trap requires me to force you into something. I booked a slip. I tied a line. You chose the rest. The room held that sentence. Naomi lifted her eyes. She had watched Gerald win many rooms by moving quickly. He interrupted, renamed, accused, corrected, smiled, and signed. By the time the harmed person found words, Gerald had already created the version that mattered. This time, the version had arrived before his signature could finish drying. Elaine turned to Naomi. "Miss Brooks, please confirm the booking." Naomi swallowed. Miriam Grace, owner Malcolm Pierce, slip A1 confirmed yesterday at 4:42 in the afternoon. Payment cleared. Vessel insurance verified. Registration verified. Shore power requested. Fuel service requested. Gerald said, "The issue was not the booking. The issue was conduct on the dock." Naomi looked at him. His conduct was calm. Gerald's voice sharpened. "Be careful." Victoria leaned forward. "Do not threaten staff in this room." Gerald opened his mouth, then closed it. Naomi's hands trembled, but she kept speaking. Mr. Pierce secured his own line. He answered questions. He asked whether ownership verification was required for every vessel owner. It is not. Gerald then denied shore power, fuel, and lounge access, and ordered security to remove him. Elaine asked, "Was there a documented safety reason?" "No," Gerald said. "I had discretion." Elaine replied, "Not unlimited discretion." She slid another document to the center of the table. Crescent Bay Operating Services Agreement, Section 7, Equal Service and Non-Discrimination. Section 9, Published Fee Compliance. Section 11, Incident Reporting Accuracy. Section 14, Emergency Suspension of Operating Manager for Safety Risk, Discrimination, False Reporting, or Fraud. Gerald's face changed at the word fraud. Fraud. Elaine did not soften it. The preliminary audit found unauthorized premium access adjustment charges on more than 40 accounts. Victoria looked at Gerald. "I was told those were premium service upgrades." Naomi said quietly, "Some were not." Gerald turned toward her. "You do not know that." Naomi looked at the tablet. "I entered them." The room went still again. Gerald had not expected that. Naomi continued. Gerald told staff to apply premium access adjustment when certain new customers wanted high visibility slips, fuel priority, or weekend dock access. Some customers received the fee waiver because Gerald recognized them. Others were charged extra with no published basis. Elaine asked, "What kind of customers?" Naomi hesitated. Malcolm did not look at her with pressure. That helped. Naomi said, "New owners, guests who were not known to Gerald. Local fishermen asking for temporary docking. Black and Latino boat owners more often than others. People who came without a broker. People who dressed like they worked on the water instead of vacationed on it." Gerald slapped one hand on the table. "That is speculation." Samuel Reed spoke for the first time. "No, that is the dock." Everyone turned. Samuel did not raise his voice. He never needed to. 30 years around engines had taught him that a quiet sound in the wrong place mattered more than a loud one. He said, "I have watched this marina long enough to know the difference between safety and sorting." Gerald gave him a cold look. "You are a contractor." Samuel nodded. "A contractor who has kept half the vessels here from sinking their owners' plans." A few people in the room looked down. Gerald leaned back. "This is becoming emotional." Malcolm looked at him. "That word again." Gerald frowned. "What word?" "Emotional. It is what people say when the record starts sounding human." Elaine almost smiled, but did not. Victoria looked at Malcolm. "I need to understand your position." Malcolm turned toward her. "My position is simple. Crescent Bay Port cannot be transferred into a new operating structure while the Marina is using public waterfront rights like a private exclusion gate. We need to know whether Gerald's action this morning was one ugly moment or part of the way this place operates." Gerald said, "I have operated Crescent Bay for 15 years. Malcolm answered, "Longevity is not innocence." That hit harder than a shout. Gerald looked away first. Outside the window, the Miriam Grace rested in slip A1. Security had stopped near the fuel kiosk, unsure whether to proceed. The dock hands were pretending not to watch. Restaurant guests had gone back to their tables, but not completely. Everyone knew something had happened. Nobody yet knew how large it was. Malcolm did. Not because of the documents, because of memory. The insult had reached something older than money. People like you do not own yachts. People like you work on them. His father had worked on them. Joseph Pierce had known engines by sound. He could stand near a diesel motor for 10 seconds and hear a cracked injector, a dirty filter, or a bearing about to fail. Owners trusted him with machines they would never let him enjoy. They wanted his hands inside the engine room and his face gone before the guests arrived. Malcolm remembered one Saturday morning when he was 12. His father had brought him to a harbor repair job because his mother was working the fish market before dawn. Joseph told him to sit on a coil of rope and watch the tide. A yacht owner in a white shirt came down from the upper deck. "Is the problem fixed?" Joseph wiped his hands. "She will run clean now. But do not push the port engine over 2,500 revolutions until I replace the cooling line." The owner looked past him, annoyed. "Can you tell that to my captain? Guests are coming." Joseph nodded. Then the owner lowered his voice. "And do not stay up here. We have people arriving." Malcolm remembered his father, hand tightening around the rag. Only once, then releasing. "Yes, sir," Joseph said. That night, Malcolm asked why he had not answered back. His father sat at the kitchen table, tying and untying a bowline with a short piece of rope. "Son," he said, "the sea does not ask who is rich before it lifts a boat. People build gates on water because they are afraid the water does not know their names." Malcolm never forgot it. Years later, after school, after night shifts, after his first freight contract, after his first failed loan application, after the company that became Pierce Harbor Group started moving cargo faster than firms 10 times its size, Malcolm could have stayed away from places like Crescent Bay. He could have owned ports from boardrooms. He could have allowed other men to keep the gates as long as the revenue arrived. But his father had not taught him to worship ownership. He had taught him to respect what ownership could repair. That was why he had come without an entourage. He wanted the truth without performance. Now he had it. Elaine placed a second folder on the table. "Mr. Pierce, we need instructions." Gerald shifted. Instructions for what? Elaine looked at Victoria. "Under the transition agreement, Pierce Harbor Group may request immediate interim controls if there is credible evidence of discriminatory service denial, false incident reporting, or fee irregularity." Victoria nodded slowly. "That is correct." Gerald said, "Credible evidence has not been established." Elaine turned the laptop toward him. The dock camera footage had already been pulled. The screen showed the main dock from above, Malcolm stepping from the yacht, Naomi approaching with the tablet, Gerald blocking her, Gerald pointing, Gerald ordering shore power denied. The audio was not perfect, but it was clear enough when Gerald raised his voice. "People like you do not own yachts. People like you work on them." Naomi closed her eyes. Samuel stared at the table. Victoria's face tightened, as if the harbor air had suddenly become difficult to breathe. Gerald said, That does not show context. Malcolm looked at him. Then give context. Gerald said nothing. Because context could not save a sentence that had told the truth too plainly. Elaine changed the screen. Incident number CBM 942. Reported by Gerald Whitmore. Customer unable to verify vessel ownership. Customer refused management instruction. Customer created disruption on main dock. Service denied for safety concern. Elaine placed Naomi booking screenshot beside it. Vessel ownership verified before arrival. Payment cleared. Insurance verified. Slip assigned. No safety alert. She looked at Gerald. Which part of your incident report was true? Gerald's lips pressed together. I interpreted the situation in real time. Naomi said, You created the situation in real time. Gerald turned on her. You are very eager to attach yourself to the new owner. Naomi went pale. Malcolm spoke before she could answer. Miss Brooks is attached to the record. That is what worries you. Victoria wrote something in her notes. Gerald saw her pen moving and understood the room was changing faster than he could control, so he tried a different defense. Mr. Pierce, Gerald said, his voice suddenly smoother, let me say this plainly. I did not know who you were. Had I known, I would have handled your arrival differently. Samuel lowered his eyes. Naomi looked at Malcolm. Elaine became very still. Malcolm leaned back. There it is. Gerald blinked. What? The whole problem in one sentence. Gerald frowned. I am apologizing. No, you are explaining that respect was available if I arrived with enough power to frighten you. Gerald's voice tightened. That is not what I meant. It is what you said. Malcolm looked toward the window, where the yacht his mother named rested on the water. My father worked on boats like mine. You used that as an insult. My mother sold fish at the morning market so I could learn numbers before I learned contracts. You would have looked at both of them and seen service, not ownership. That is why I do not trust your apology. The room became quiet. Not because Malcolm had raised his voice, because he had not. Elaine knew him well enough to understand that this was the closest he came to showing pain in a business room. Victoria asked softly, Miriam Grace. Malcolm turned. The yacht name. My mother name was Miriam Grace Pierce. Samuel's eyes softened. She sold red snapper near Pier 4. Malcolm nodded. Every morning before sunrise. Samuel smiled faintly. She could bargain a dock captain down until he thanked her for it. For the first time that day, Malcolm almost smiled. Yes. Then the smile left. That boat is not a trophy, it is a memory that floats. Gerald looked uncomfortable, as if humanity had entered a room where he preferred policy. Malcolm continued. This port fed my family before it ever paid my company. That is why I will not let it become a place where people are measured by how expensive they look when they step onto the dock. Elaine closed the folder. Then we proceed. Malcolm nodded. Proceed with preservation and interim service controls. Do not suspend the whole marina today. Gerald looked surprised. You are not closing it? No.
Malcolm's eyes moved to the window, to the dockhands, the fuel attendant, the old service shed, the fishing pier beyond the luxury slips. People work here. Fishermen use this water. Visitors have legal reservations. Closing the marina to punish you would make them pay first. Victoria studied him. What are you requesting instead? Malcolm answered in order. Gerald Whitmore is removed from direct authority over Malcolm Pierce reservation. Naomi Brooks, Samuel Reed. Incident records, fee tables, and dock access decisions pending review. Gerald stood. You cannot remove me from my own marina. Victoria looked at him. It is not your marina. The sentence struck harder than anyone expected. Gerald sat down slowly. Malcolm continued. Shore power and fuel service for Miriam Grace are restored immediately. All manual premium access adjustment charges are frozen. No reservation may be canceled without written reason tied to published Marina policy. Local fishing vessels with existing access rights cannot be displaced during this review. Staff are protected from retaliation for providing records. Elaine wrote quickly. Victoria nodded. I can authorize interim compliance oversight under the Port Authority Transition Clause. Gerald said, This is an overreaction to one sentence. Samuel looked at him. No, this is what happens when one sentence opens the ledger. That line sat in the room like a key turning. Elaine asked Naomi, Are there other records we should preserve immediately? Naomi looked at Gerald, then at Malcolm. Yes, tell us. Cancellation codes, the premium adjustment ledger, fuel variance reports, and the side list. Victoria looked up. What side list? Naomi opened her tablet and searched. Gerald had gone very still. Naomi said, It is not in the main booking system. It is a spreadsheet Gerald kept for high-preference clients. Certain slips were held outside normal booking. Some fees were waived. Some names were marked with phrases. Elaine asked, What phrases? Naomi swallowed. Good fit, not Marina profile, working dock only, check ownership twice. Malcolm's face did not change, but his hand closed around the rope bracelet on his wrist. Elaine said, Send it to preservation. Naomi nodded. Gerald's voice came low. Naomi, think about what you are doing. Victoria stood. That is enough. Gerald looked at her. You are letting an employee steal internal records. Elaine said, She is preserving operational records under a valid review. Victoria turned to Naomi. Send them now. Naomi pressed the command. The tablet confirmed upload. Preservation folder active. Crescent transition review. The file count began to rise. 17, 29, 44, 61. Gerald watched the numbers climb like water entering a boat through a hole he had made himself. Outside, a dockhand connected shore power to the Miriam Grace. The small green light appeared on the pedestal. Fuel service resumed. Slip 1 remained assigned. Malcolm did not look at Gerald when it happened. He looked at the vessel, at his mother's name, at the line his father would have tied cleanly. He had wanted, for one moment, to walk away, to tell Elaine to close the marina, remove Gerald, cancel the old operating staff, and let everyone feel the weight of what had happened. The thought had come fast. It had been honest. Then he saw a deckhand by the fuel station, young, nervous, trying to do the right thing without losing his job. He saw the fishing boats beyond the luxury slips. He saw Samuel, older now, still standing for a harbor that had taken more from him than it had ever publicly thanked. Malcolm chose differently. His father's voice returned. Do not buy the gate just to stand in front of it. He looked at Victoria. I want the review room open by noon. Full transition audit. Naomi and Samuel protected as witnesses. Fee records preserved. Dock camera footage preserved. Harbor Patrol call records preserved. And Gerald removed from all evidence handling. Gerald stared. You are making me look guilty before the review. Malcolm said, You did that before I made the call. At 11:12, Victoria Shaw issued the temporary directive. Gerald Whitmore would retain no authority over Crescent Bay Marina operations involving customer access, fee adjustments, incident reporting, dock assignment, staff discipline, or communication with Harbor Patrol until the transition review concluded. Interim dock control moved to Port Authority compliance with Pierce Harbor Group oversight. Naomi Brooks was assigned temporary operational coordinator. Samuel Reed was requested as safety witness for dock and repair yard practices. Elaine Porter was granted access to the operating rights file. Gerald listened as each line was read. The man who had ordered Malcolm off the dock now could not authorize a fuel pump. The man who denied lounge access now had his office keycard restricted. The man who said people like you do not own yachts had just learned that people like Malcolm sometimes owned the contract underneath the dock. And the worst part for Gerald was not that the room saw his humiliation. It was that the records had only begun to speak. At 11:23, Crescent Bay Marina no longer sounded like a luxury dock. It sounded like a system being opened. The printer in the Port Authority conference room kept pushing out booking summaries. The wall screen showed fee tables, cancellation codes, manual overrides, and dock assignment changes from the last 3 years. Every few minutes, another file moved into the preservation folder. Naomi Brooks sat at the far end of the table with her tablet connected to the main screen. Her hands were still unsteady, but her voice had become clearer. Fear had not left her. It had simply stopped driving. Elaine Porter stood beside the screen. "Start with incident number CBM 942, she said. Naomi opened the file. Gerald Whitmore looked away before the first page loaded. That told Malcolm Pierce something. A man who believed his record was clean usually wanted everyone to read it. A man who looked away knew the ink was still wet. The report appeared on the wall. Customer unable to verify vessel ownership. Customer refused management instruction. Customer created disruption on main dock. Service denied for safety concern. Elaine turned toward Gerald. You created this after the booking record had already confirmed ownership. Gerald folded his arms. I created it based on my direct observation. Elaine clicked to the booking page. Vessel ownership verified yesterday at 4:42 in the afternoon. She clicked again. Insurance verified. Again. Payment cleared. Again. Slip A1 assigned. Again. No safety alert. Then she opened the camera still from the dock. Malcolm was shown tying the stern line. Naomi stood with the tablet. Gerald was pointing toward the water. Elaine said, I see a vessel in position, a valid booking, and a marina manager escalating the situation. Where is the safety concern? Gerald spoke slowly. He refused to cooperate. Malcolm said, I asked whether you required every owner to show papers after system verification. Gerald looked at him. That tone is exactly what I am referring to. Naomi looked up. A question is not a safety concern. Gerald turned. You are not the legal authority here. Elaine answered. No, she is the person who handled the booking before you falsified the report. The word falsified changed the room. Victoria Shaw shifted in her chair. Gerald Lawyer was not present yet. Gerald had refused to wait for one because he still believed the meeting could be handled by confidence. Now confidence had become a thin wall against a rising tide. Gerald leaned toward Victoria. This review is being driven by an offended buyer. We should pause until proper counsel is present. Victoria answered carefully. The preservation review will continue. You may request counsel for personal representation, but operational records cannot wait. He stared at her. You are taking his side. Victoria looked at the screen. I am taking the side of the document that existed before your story. That was the first crack Gerald could not patch with charm. Elaine turned back to Naomi. Open the manual cancellation file. Naomi hesitated. Gerald's voice lowered. Naomi. Only her name, but the room heard the threat inside it. Malcolm did not look at Gerald. He looked at Naomi. Miss Brooks, you are under witness protection for this review. No one in this room is allowed to discipline you for preserving records. Victoria added, that protection is now recorded by Port Authority. Naomi nodded once. Then she opened the file. The screen filled with names, vessels, dates, slip requests, cancellation codes. Elaine asked, filter for not Marina profile. Naomi typed, the list shortened, 23 entries. Gerald said, that phrase is shorthand for vessel fit. Samuel Reed gave a quiet laugh with no humor in it. Vessel fit. Gerald turned. Do you have something to add, Captain Reed? Samuel said, yes, a 28-foot fishing boat can fit where a 38-foot party boat fits, if the dock assignment says so. What did not fit was the owner. Elaine clicked the first entry. A woman named Denise Alvarez had booked a weekend slip for a restored sailboat. The reservation was canceled manually. Reason, not Marina profile. Replacement vessel, a larger yacht owned by one of Gerald's regular clients. Fee waived. Second entry, Harbor Youth Sailing Cooperative. Request for 2 temporary slips during a school event. Cancelled. Reason, traffic and image conflict. The slips were later assigned to a private bachelor party. Third entry, Reed Family Fishing. Long-term local access renewal. Moved from Central Dock to Outer Working Dock. Reason, visual congestion near Premium Corridor. Samuel, face hardened. That was my nephew. Gerald said the Central Dock was being repositioned for tourism. Samuel looked at him. Tourism did not unload bait at 4 in the morning. My nephew did. No one spoke for a moment. The screen kept glowing. Names do that when they stop being categories. They make harm harder to hide. Elaine asked Naomi, "What is Premium Corridor?" Naomi looked at Victoria. It is the walkway between the restaurant deck, slip A1 through A6, and the lounge entrance. Gerald wanted it to look polished during weekends, investor visits, and yacht club events. Victoria said, "Polished." Naomi nodded. It meant no fishing gear, no coolers, no repair carts, no workers eating lunch on the visible benches, and no customers Gerald described as uncertain presentation. Malcolm repeated the phrase, uncertain presentation. Naomi opened another filter. The phrase appeared 14 times. Gerald said, "This is being stripped of context." Malcolm turned toward him. "Then speak plainly. What made their presentation uncertain?" Gerald's jaw moved, but no answer came. Samuel said, "It meant they did not look rich enough for the picture." Gerald snapped, "You have resented this Marina for years, because you could never move beyond the service shed." The room went still. Samuel looked at him. Malcolm did too. Gerald realized too late that he had stopped defending the report and started proving the culture. Samuel's voice stayed even. "I stayed in that service shed because when engines fail, people suddenly remember labor has value." Malcolm looked at the old mechanic. He did not speak because Samuel did not need rescuing. Samuel continued, "I have pulled children from stalled boats, patched fuel lines before fires started, and kept guests alive who never learned my name. If that is not moving beyond the shed, maybe the shed has more honor than your office." Victoria looked down at her notes. Gerald's breathing grew heavier. He had always counted on workers not answering. Today, they were answering, with records behind them. Elaine opened the Premium Access Adjustment Ledger. The numbers filled the screen. Line after line. Additional dock access charge. Weekend visibility charge. Priority slip handling. Manual premium adjustment. Naomi said, "None of those appear in the public fee schedule." Victoria looked sharply at Gerald. "Are these authorized?" Gerald said, "They are discretionary service enhancements." Elaine clicked a customer account. The customer had paid an additional $800 for a weekend slip after the booking was initially marked not Marina profile. She clicked another. A black couple from Baltimore had paid $1,200 after being told their vessel required extra dock handling.
The vessel was smaller than 2 other boats assigned the same week with no fee. Another. A local fishing family was charged a seasonal access surcharge after refusing to move from a central slip. Another. A new yacht owner with a Caribbean surname was charged an ownership verification service fee. Naomi said quietly, "That one bothered me the most." "Why?" Malcolm asked. "Because there is no such fee." Elaine turned to Gerald. "Where did the money go?" Gerald straightened. "Into Marina revenue." Elaine clicked the export report. Some entries were coded under miscellaneous dock services, some under premium adjustment, and some under manual cash reconciliation. Victoria's face went cold. "Manual cash reconciliation?" Gerald said. "Accounting categorized them, not me." Elaine opened the user field. Created by Gerald Whitmore, modified by Gerald Whitmore, approved by Gerald Whitmore. The room did not need anyone to explain that. Gerald said, Managers approve fees every day.
Malcolm answered, managers approve fees that exist. Gerald leaned back. You are turning a race complaint into a fishing expedition. Elaine said, no, you turned a dock into a toll gate. Outside the conference room, Harbor Patrol arrived. 2 officers stepped from a white utility cart near the Marina office. They had responded to Gerald's earlier call about a trespass issue. By the time they arrived, the trespass issue had become a Port Authority review. Gerald saw them through the glass and stood quickly. Good, let us get an official statement from enforcement. Elaine looked at Victoria. Did Port Authority request Harbor Patrol? Victoria shook her head. Gerald said, I called them before this meeting. Malcolm looked at Naomi. When? Naomi checked the radio traffic record, 1003. After he created incident number CBM 942. Elaine said, bring them in. The officers entered the conference room. The senior officer, Lieutenant Harris, looked from Victoria to Gerald to Malcolm. We received a Marina report of possible vessel trespass and refusal to depart. Victoria said, that report is under review as potentially false. Lieutenant Harris turned to Gerald. Who made the report? Gerald lifted his chin. I did. Elaine placed the booking record on the table. The vessel had a confirmed reservation. She placed the incident report beside it. Ownership was verified before arrival. She placed the camera still beside that. The vessel was already safely docked. Then she played the radio clip. If he will not depart, call Harbor Patrol. Lieutenant Harris listened without changing expression. He looked at Malcolm. Were you asked to depart after service was denied? Yes. Did you threaten staff? No. Naomi said, he did not. Samuel said, he did not. Lieutenant Harris looked at Gerald. Was there any mechanical hazard, navigation hazard, intoxication concern, violence concern, or dock obstruction? Gerald said, the issue was uncertain authorization. Lieutenant Harris pointed to the booking record. This says authorization was confirmed. Gerald was silent. Lieutenant Harris closed his notebook. Harbor Patrol will not remove a verified vessel from an assigned slip based on a disputed and unsupported Marina report. I will also note that an enforcement call was made after verification was already available. Gerald looked furious. That note will be attached to the review, Elaine said. The officer nodded. Send the request through Port Authority. Then he left. Gerald sat down. He had tried to bring in outside authority. Instead, he had created another record against himself. Malcolm watched the process without pleasure. This was not entertainment to him. Every page represented someone who had been treated as if the dock was a privilege they had stolen. Every fee represented a person who paid extra to avoid conflict or embarrassment. Every cancellation code represented a family or worker pushed farther from the water by words designed to sound operational. He looked out at the Miriam Grace. His mother name was still shining on the hull. Miriam Grace Pierce had stood in the fish market before sunrise for 26 years. She knew every captain by catch, every weather pattern by smell, and every dishonest buyer by the way they looked at the scale. She had taught Malcolm numbers by making him count change on overturned crates. Once, when a restaurant buyer tried to underpay her, she placed both hands on the fish table and said, "A clean scale is respect." Malcolm had not understood then. Now he did. Records were scales, and Gerald had been leaning on them for years. Victoria Shaw asked for a 10-minute break at 12:10. Nobody left the building. Gerald stepped into the hallway and immediately took out his phone. Elaine saw him. "Mr. Whitmore, all communication related to this review is under preservation." He forced a smile. "I am calling my attorney. That is allowed." Gerald turned away and lowered his voice, but Naomi, standing near the coffee station, heard enough. "Delete the side file from the shared drive," he whispered. "No, not archive. Delete it. And remove anything marked profile. Do it now." Naomi froze. Gerald saw her reflection in the glass. For 1 second, neither moved. Then he ended the call. "You misunderstood," he said. Naomi did not answer. She walked back into the conference room and closed the door behind her. Her face had lost color. Malcolm stood. What happened? Naomi looked at Victoria, then Elaine. Gerald just instructed someone to delete the side file. Gerald entered behind her. That is false. Elaine turned to Victoria. We need Port Authority information systems on the line now. Victoria called immediately. Within 4 minutes, the shared drive administrator joined by speaker. Elaine asked, has any user attempted to delete files from the Marina operations folder since preservation began? The administrator typed, yes. Which files? Side client notes spreadsheet, manual profile codes, premium adjustment backup, several image corridor files. Gerald said, that could be routine cleanup. Elaine asked, user. The administrator answered, Assistant Manager Carl Benson. Victoria asked, was the deletion successful? No, preservation lock blocked it. Copies are retained. Gerald's mouth closed. The administrator continued. There is also a call log from Mr. Whitmore to Carl Benson 2 minutes before the deletion attempt. Every person in the room looked at Gerald. No video could have been clearer. Gerald tried to stand again. I need counsel. Elaine said, you needed counsel before you ordered deletion of preserved records. Victoria's voice became hard. Dr. Whitmore. Gerald snapped, I am not a doctor. She did not blink. Mr. Whitmore, you are relieved from the room until counsel arrives. Port Authority security will remain with you. You will not contact staff, harbor patrol, customers, contractors, or any Marina employee during this review. Gerald looked at Malcolm. You are enjoying this. Malcolm shook his head. No, I am recognizing it. Gerald did not understand. Samuel did. He had seen the same look on Joseph Pierce's face years ago. Not triumph, recognition, the weary knowledge that the insult was never isolated. Gerald was escorted to a smaller office beside the hallway. His Marina radio stayed on the conference table. His access card was placed beside it. His office keys followed. Objects can become symbols without anyone planning it. The radio he used to command the dock, the card he used to enter every gate, the keys he believed proved the Marina was his, all sitting in front of the people he had tried to silence. At 12:48, Elaine resumed the review. Open the side list, she said. Naomi did. The spreadsheet appeared. Client preference notes. Gerald had built the list over years. Some names had green marks, some yellow, some red. Green notes included good family, yacht club known, broker verified, premium appearance, donor friendly. Yellow notes included ask for added documentation, watch dock behavior, avoid lounge placement. Red notes included working dock only, not Marina profile, check ownership twice, avoid premium corridor, possible renter, local fisherman, too many guests, image issue. Victoria covered her mouth for a moment, then lowered her hand. This was inside our concession. Malcolm said, yes. She turned to Naomi. Who could access this? Naomi answered, Gerald, Assistant Manager Carl, sometimes me if I was told to update notes. Did staff use it to make decisions? Naomi, eyes lowered. Yes. Samuel said, that explains why boats with better records were pushed out while friends of Gerald held slips for weekends they did not even use. Elaine opened dock assignment history. Slip A1. Over the last 18 months, it had been held 11 times for preferred clients without open booking entries. Slip A2. 9 manual holds. Slip B4. Reserved for a yacht club family while a paid local customer was moved to a less protected slip. Fuel priority records showed similar treatment. Some vessels jumped the queue, others waited. Gerald favorites were noted as known quality. Others were noted as verify before service. Naomi whispered, I am sorry. Malcolm looked at her. For what you did, or what you saw? Both. He nodded. Then tell the whole truth. She did. She explained the weekends when fishermen were asked to move coolers out of sight before restaurant investors arrived. She explained how dockhands were told not to eat lunch near the main walkway because it looked too working class. She explained how Gerald told her to ask extra questions when a customer did not look like the boat. She said that phrase carefully. Did not look like the boat. The room understood. Samuel stood slowly. May I add something? Victoria nodded. Samuel placed both hands on the table. This port was not built by white holes and restaurant lights. It was built by fish hands, rope hands, wrench hands, tide hands. People who knew when a storm was coming before the weather station said a word. Gerald turned those people into background. Then he charged them extra for standing too close to what they built. He looked at the side list. When you call someone working dock only, you forget the dock works because they do. Malcolm looked at Samuel with quiet gratitude. Elaine added Samuel's statement to the record. By 1:30, the pattern was no longer a suspicion. It was structured. A false report, a denied, verified booking, a discriminatory statement, unauthorized fee categories, manual slip holds for favored clients, displacement of local fishing vessels, a side list with profile labels, an attempted deletion after preservation, a harbor patrol call built on an unsupported trespass claim. Gerald had not merely insulted Malcolm Pierce. He had exposed how Crescent Bay Marina had been sorting people while pretending to sort vessels. Victoria Shaw stood from the head of the table. I am calling an emergency Port Authority session for 3 o'clock. Elaine nodded. Pierce Harbor Group will be present. Naomi looked at Malcolm. What happens to the staff? Malcolm answered, the ones who lied will answer for it. The ones who were pressured will be heard. The ones who kept the dock safe will not be punished for Gerald record. Samuel asked, and the fishermen? Malcolm looked through the window toward the older pier. They come into the review. Victoria said, that will be messy. Malcolm answered, good. Clean rooms hide dirty systems too easily. At 2:15, word had spread across Crescent Bay. A few yacht owners complained about delays at the fuel dock. A fisherman named Luis Alvarez walked in with 3 years of fee receipts. A dockhand brought radio logs. The young fuel attendant brought a handwritten note Gerald had once given him. Do not prioritize old pier traffic during investor weekends. Naomi scanned each item. The file count kept rising. Gerald watched from the side office through a strip of glass in the door. For 15 years, people had entered his office alone and left quieter than they came in. Now they were entering the conference room together. That was the part he had never prepared for. At 2:58, Victoria opened the Port Authority session. The screen at the front displayed one title, Crescent Bay Marina Transition Review. Under it were 3 words that made Gerald, attorney, now seated beside him, close his pen before anyone spoke. Potential operating breach. Malcolm Pierce sat across the room, hands folded, the rope bracelet on his wrist. He did not look like a man waiting for revenge. He looked like a man waiting for the scale to be cleaned. Elaine placed the first document on the table, incident number CBM 942. Then the booking record, then the side list, then the premium fee ledger, then the deletion attempt report, then the harbor patrol note, then Samuel's statement, then Naomi's statement, then the dock camera still. Each page was a wave. Gerald Whitmore had spent years building gates on water. By 3:12, the tide had reached his chair. Gerald Whitmore sat at the end of the Port Authority conference table with his attorney beside him. But the old posture was gone. He still wore the blazer. He still had the voice. He still had 15 years of habit telling him that rooms usually bent his way if he waited long enough. But the table was no longer his dock. The screen at the front showed the words he could not soften. Potential operating breach. Victoria Shaw sat at the center of the room as the Port Authority representative. Her face was controlled, but her notes had become sharper with every document. Elaine Porter stood beside the screen with the transition agreement open. Naomi Brooks sat near the evidence console, her tablet connected and her breathing measured. Samuel Reed sat behind her with his hands folded over a cap he had worn on that harbor for decades. Malcolm Pierce sat across from Gerald, no entourage, no raised voice, no need to perform. His yacht still rested in slip A1, visible through the window behind the conference room. The dark blue hull caught the afternoon light. Miriam Grace sat there like a quiet witness. Victoria opened the session. This emergency review concerns Crescent Bay Marina operations during the active transition of commercial control to Pierce Harbor Group. The questions before us are whether the marina manager denied verified service without valid cause, whether incident reporting was falsified, whether fees were applied outside the published schedule, whether discriminatory profile notes were used in operations, and whether preserved records were targeted for deletion. Gerald Attorney stood. For the record, my client disputes any characterization of discrimination, fraud, or intentional misconduct. He has served this marina for 15 years and made real-time decisions under pressure. Malcolm looked at Gerald. Real-time decisions reveal long-time habits. Gerald did not answer. Elaine placed the first document on the screen. Miriam Grace Booking, owner, Malcolm Pierce. Slip A1 confirmed. Payment cleared. Insurance verified. Shore power requested. Fuel service requested. No safety restriction. Elaine said, "This record existed before Mr. Pierce arrived." She moved to the second document. Gerald, incident report. Customer unable to verify vessel ownership. Customer refused management instruction. Customer created disruption on main dock. Service denied for safety concern. Elaine turned toward the table. This record was created after Mr. Whitmore had access to the verified booking. Gerald Attorney said, "Interpretation of risk can change at the dock." Elaine nodded. "So let us review the dock." The camera footage played. Malcolm tying his own line. Naomi approaching with the tablet. Gerald taking the tablet. Gerald pointing at the yacht. Gerald ordering shore power and fuel withheld. Then the audio sharpened. "People like you do not own yachts. People like you work on them." The room heard it again. This time there was no wind, no dock noise, no restaurant voices, just the sentence, clear enough to remove all escape routes. Gerald Attorney said, "The phrase is regrettable, but it does not establish systemic wrongdoing." Samuel Reed looked up. "It establishes the door."
The records establish what the door was used for. Elaine changed the screen. Side client notes. Green marks. Good family. Yacht club known. Premium appearance. Donor friendly. Yellow marks. Ask for added documentation. Watch dock behavior. Avoid lounge placement. Red marks. Working dock only, not marina profile. Check ownership twice. Avoid premium corridor. Possible renter. Image issue. Victoria looked at the list for a long time. Who created this file? Naomi answered. Gerald created it. Assistant manager Carl Benson updated parts of it. I was instructed to add notes when customers did not match what Gerald called the marina image. Gerald said, "That file was informal. It was not policy." Malcolm answered, "Informal discrimination is still discrimination when staff use it to decide who gets served." Elaine opened dock assignment history. The side list had not stayed informal. Customers marked Good Family received weekend holds without open booking. Customers marked Yacht Club Known received fee waivers. Customers marked Not Marina Profile were moved away from visible slips. Customers marked Check Ownership Twice were required to show documents even when the booking system had verified them. Customers marked Working Dock Only were routed away from the premium corridor. Elaine said, "The file was operational." Gerald shifted. It was guidance. Naomi said, "It was instruction." Gerald turned toward her. "You are trying to save yourself." Naomi's face tightened, but she did not look away. "Yes." The room went still. She continued, "I am trying to save the part of myself that knew this was wrong and kept following it because I was afraid of losing my job." Gerald had no answer ready for honesty. Naomi turned to Victoria. I added some of the notes. I charged some of the fees. I told customers Gerald was unavailable when he did not want to speak to them. I watched fishermen get moved to the old pier before investor weekends. I should have refused sooner. Her voice shook once, then steadied. But I will not lie today. Samuel lowered his head. Malcolm watched her with a hard kindness. Not absolution, recognition. Victoria wrote her statement into the record. Elaine opened the premium access adjustment ledger. More than 40 entries appeared. Some were small, some were large. All were outside the public fee table. Elaine selected one. Denise Alvarez. Restored sailboat. Weekend slip canceled. Premium access adjustment offered for alternate placement. She selected another. Christopher and Amara Bell. Vessel ownership verified. Additional ownership verification service fee charged. She selected another. Reed Family Fishing. Seasonal access surcharge after refusing relocation. Samuel's hands tightened on his cap. Victoria asked, Was ownership verification service fee in the published tariff? Naomi answered, No. Was premium access adjustment in the published tariff? No. Was seasonal access surcharge for existing local access rights in the tariff? No. Gerald Attorney said, Marina operators frequently adjust service charges based on capacity, staff demands, and vessel handling. Elaine replied, Then the fee schedule must authorize it. It did not. The customer notice must explain it. It did not. The accounting code must match the service. It did not. And the pattern of who received the charges matters. She opened the comparison chart. Customers known to Gerald, waivers. Yacht club referrals, waivers. High-income visitors with broker introductions, waivers. Local fishermen, added charges. First-time Black and Latino owners, added verification fees. Customers marked not Marina profile, premium adjustments. The numbers did not shout. They did not need to. They lined up. Gerald said, This is a statistical attack without context. Malcolm looked at him. Context is the thing you tried to delete. Elaine opened the deletion attempt report. Preservation hold activated. Call from Gerald Whitmore to Carl Benson. Deletion attempted 2 minutes later. Files targeted. Side client notes. Manual profile codes. Premium adjustment backup. Image corridor files. Deletion blocked. Copies retained. Victoria turned to Gerald. Did you instruct Carl Benson to delete files after preservation began? Gerald Attorney answered for him. My client will not respond without reviewing the full log. Elaine said, The full log is preserved. Malcolm looked at Gerald. You called Harbor Patrol on a verified owner. You wrote a false safety report. You denied services without a safety cause. You kept a side list that sorted people by profile. You charged fees that did not exist. Then when the records were preserved, someone tried to delete the files after your call. Gerald stared at him. You came here to destroy me. Malcolm's voice was quiet. No, I came here to inspect a port. He touched the rope bracelet on his wrist. You destroyed your own cover. Victoria leaned back. Mr. Pierce, Port Authority needs clarity on the ownership and operating rights before we move to remedies. Elaine opened the main agreement. The screen changed. Crescent Bay Port Commercial Control Transfer. Approved by Port Authority Resolution. Commercial Operator, Pierce Harbor Group. Authorized Controlling Officer, Malcolm Pierce. Covered Assets. Crescent Bay Marina. Fuel Dock. Repair Yard. Waterfront Restaurant Leases. Small Cargo Pier. Operating Service Contract. Emergency Replacement Rights. Grounds. Discriminatory Service Denial. Falsified Incident Reporting. Unauthorized fee practices. Safety risk. Obstruction of transition review. Failure to preserve records. Elaine read each line slowly, not theatrically, precisely. Every line was a plank removed from under Gerald's chair. Victoria said, "For the record, Port Authority approved the transition last week. The commercial control period began at 8 in the morning today. Existing management remains subject to immediate review during transition. If these grounds are established, Pierce Harbor Group may request emergency replacement of the Marina manager and interim operating controls." Gerald turned to Victoria. "You knew this before today." Victoria did not flinch. "I knew the transition. I did not know you would greet the incoming controlling officer by denying he could own a yacht." Gerald's attorney said, "The Port Authority should avoid a rushed decision based on a public relations crisis." Samuel said, "This is not rushed." Everyone looked at him. He stood slowly. "I am 71 years old. I have worked this harbor since I was 38. I knew Joseph Pierce. I watched him fix engines for men who would not let him stand on their upper decks. I watched fishermen moved farther from the water when the restaurants came. I watched dock hands told to hide repair carts because labor ruined the view." He looked at Gerald. "For 15 years, people went into your office with papers, receipts, proof, and rights. They came out quieter. That is not a public relations crisis. That is a long tide coming back." The room was silent. Samuel sat down. Malcolm did not move. But for a moment, the boy he used to be was there too. A child sitting on rope outside an engine room, watching his father swallow insult because rent was due. Watching wealthy men believe ownership meant never seeing the hands that kept them moving. Malcolm looked down at the rope bracelet. His father had tied it for him the day Malcolm left for college. Bowline knot. Simple, strong. A knot that held under pressure and could still be untied when the work was done. Joseph had said, "Own what you build, son, but do not let ownership make you forget who taught you to hold the line." Malcolm had carried that lesson into every port deal. Now the line was in front of him. He could use the moment to crush Gerald quickly. He could demand total closure of the Marina, cancel every reservation, send a message so loud that no one at Crescent Bay would ever forget who held power now. Part of him wanted that, the honest part, the wounded part, the part that heard Gerald turn work into shame. Then he looked through the window. A young deckhand was guiding a family toward a rented sailboat. A fisherman at the old pier was unloading coolers. A fuel attendant was checking a hose connection. A mechanic carried a toolbox across the service yard. They would pay first if he made power perform for his anger. His father's voice returned. "Do not buy the gate just to stand in front of it." Malcolm lifted his eyes. Pierce Harbor Group requests emergency replacement of Gerald Whitmore as Marina manager, effective immediately. Gerald, attorney, stood. "We object." Malcolm continued. "Not closure of Crescent Bay Marina. Replacement of the gatekeeper who abused the gate." Victoria turned to him. "State your requested controls." Malcolm spoke in order. "Gerald Whitmore is suspended from all operational authority at Crescent Bay Port pending full investigation. His system access is revoked. His Marina radio, office keys, fuel authorization code, and dock assignment privileges remain surrendered. He may not contact staff, harbor patrol, customers, contractors, or Port Authority witnesses about this review. The side list, fee ledger, cancellation records, dock camera footage, radio calls, harbor patrol notes, and accounting exports remain preserved. All charges labeled Premium Access Adjustment, Ownership Verification Service Fee, Seasonal Access Surcharge, or similar unpublished fees are frozen pending refund review. All future service decisions must be tied to published Marina policy and recorded safety criteria. Local fishing access cannot be moved during transition without Port Authority approval. Naomi Brooks is appointed Interim Operations Coordinator under Port Authority Compliance. Samuel Reed is appointed Harbor Safety Advisor for the Transition Review. A public fee table will be posted before the end of the week. Victoria asked, who will oversee the immediate operation? Elaine answered, Pierce Harbor Group has a transition team on standby. They can be in place by 4:30. Port Authority Compliance can remain on site until then. Gerald laughed suddenly. So, that is the game. You replace me with your people and call it justice. Malcolm looked at him. Justice would be easy if this were only about replacing you. This is about making sure the next person cannot do what you did, with a cleaner smile. Gerald said, You think you are better than me because you bought the port? No. Then what makes you different? Malcolm paused. I know buying the port does not make the water mine. That sentence ended the argument better than force could have. Victoria called for a vote from the Emergency Port Authority panel. The first motion, immediate suspension of Gerald Whitmore from Crescent Bay Marina Operational Authority pending investigation. Approved. The second motion, activation of emergency transition control under Pierce Harbor Group and Port Authority compliance. Approved. The third motion, mandatory preservation and forensic review of all relevant operational records. Approved. The fourth motion, freeze on unpublished marina fees and review for customer refunds. Approved. The fifth motion, protection for staff and contractors providing evidence. Approved. The sixth motion, independent review of local fishing access displacement, dock assignment history, and harbor patrol referral patterns. Approved. The secretary recorded each vote. Gerald sat very still. At 3:49, Port Authority security disabled his access card. At 3:51, his Marina system login was suspended. At 3:53, the fuel dock authorization code changed. At 3:56, a notice went to all Crescent Bay staff. Gerald Whitmore is suspended from Marina operations effective immediately. All staff will report to Interim Operations Coordinator Naomi Brooks under Port Authority compliance until transition team arrival. Do not alter, delete, move, or destroy any records. Retaliation against staff or contractors is prohibited. Naomi read the notice on her tablet, her mouth parted slightly. Interim Operations Coordinator. She looked at Malcolm. I do not know if I am ready. Malcolm said, ready for power or ready to use it cleanly? She answered honestly, both. Good. That means you might be careful with it. Samuel smiled. That is more than we had this morning. Outside the conference room, staff phones began chiming. The news moved through the dock faster than any formal announcement. The fuel attendant looked at his screen and then at the pump. The deckhands looked toward the office. The security guard stepped away from the Miriam Grace. A fisherman near the old pier read the message twice and called another fisherman over. At slip A1, the shore power light stayed green. The yacht did not move. For 15 years, Gerald had decided who seemed worthy of the marina view. Now he could not open the booking system. Victoria turned to Elaine. Port Authority will issue a limited public statement by 5. It will confirm operational transition and independent review without naming individuals until legal approval. Elaine nodded. Pierce Harbor Group will cooperate. Gerald's attorney said, We will challenge this. Victoria said, That is your right. Malcolm said, The records will be waiting. Gerald stood. He looked first at Victoria, then Elaine, then Naomi, then Samuel. Last, he looked at Malcolm. You think these people will thank you when fees rise and standards fall? Malcolm stood too. Standards are not falling, they are being measured. Gerald sneered. You will learn this marina cannot run on feelings, Samuel said. It never did. It ran on labor. Naomi added, and records. Elaine said, and contracts. Malcolm looked at Gerald. And from today forward, respect will be part of the operation, not decoration. Gerald was escorted out at 4:07. He did not leave through the private Marina office door. Port Authority security walked him down the main dock, past the restaurant deck, past the fuel station, past the service shed, past the same slip where he had tried to remove Malcolm. People watched, not cheering, not laughing, just watching. Sometimes accountability is quiet, because everyone knows noise would make it smaller. When Gerald passed Samuel, he did not look at him. When he passed Naomi, she did not lower her eyes. When he passed Malcolm, he stopped for half a second. The yacht behind Malcolm was still named Miriam Grace. Gerald looked at the hull, then at the man beside it. He seemed to want one final insult. None came. His words had already done enough damage to him. Security led him to the parking lot. The gate closed. At 4:30, the Pierce Harbor Group transition team arrived. They did not come with banners. They came with checklists. One team went to the booking office, one to the fuel dock, one to the repair yard, one to the old fishing pier, one to the accounting server, one to staff interviews. Naomi stood in the Marina office for the first time without Gerald's shadow behind her. She opened the daily operations board and saw 3 holds marked Private Preference. She deleted nothing. She flagged them for review. Then she moved 2 local vessels back into central dock positions they had paid for. She typed the reason in plain language. Restored to published booking order. The system saved it. Samuel watched from the doorway. How does it feel? Naomi looked at the screen. Like I should have done it sooner. He nodded. Maybe, but sooner is gone. Clean is still here. At 5:12, Malcolm walked alone to the edge of slip A1. The day had begun with a rope in his hand and a man telling him people like him did not own yachts. Now the port was under review. Gerald was suspended, Naomi was protected, Samuel was recognized. Fees were frozen, records were preserved. But Malcolm did not feel victorious. He felt the weight of what came next. Ownership had revealed the truth. It had not repaired it yet. Elaine joined him at the dock. You could have closed the marina. He looked at the water. I know. You wanted to, for a minute. What stopped you? He touched the rope bracelet. My father worked too hard on other men boats for me to punish workers just because I finally own the dock. Elaine nodded. Then we build the remedy. Malcolm looked toward the old fishing pier, where gulls circled above coolers and nets. Not a remedy, he said. A harbor that tells the truth. At 5:30, the Port Authority public statement went out. Crescent Bay Marina has entered emergency transition oversight following credible concerns regarding service denial, unpublished fee practices, record integrity, and customer access procedures. An independent review is active. Marina services remain open under interim compliance supervision. The statement did not name Gerald yet, but everyone at Crescent Bay knew. The man who had used standards as a fence had lost control of the gate, and by morning, the people he had pushed to the edges of the port would begin bringing receipts, letters, canceled bookings, hidden fees, and stories that had waited years for someone with authority to read them. They came quietly at first. A fisherman with a folder wrapped in plastic, a couple from Baltimore with a printed booking confirmation and an extra verification fee they never understood. A sailing coach from the Harbor Youth Sailing Cooperative with 3 canceled slip requests. A restaurant worker whose brother had been told his repair truck could not park near the premium corridor because guests would see it. A woman named Denise Alvarez arrived before 8 with a restored sailboat photograph and a cancellation notice marked Not Marina Profile. Naomi Brooks met each person at the Marina office door, not behind Gerald's old desk, at the door. She took their names, copied their records, and gave each of them a case number. No one was told to come back later. No one was told the manager was unavailable. No one was asked to lower their voice because customers might hear. The customers were the point now. At 9:15, Malcolm Pierce stood inside the old booking office with Elaine Porter, Victoria Shaw, Naomi Brooks, and Samuel Reed. The windows looked out across Crescent Bay, where the marina had already begun to change in small ways. The fee board by the fuel dock had been covered with a temporary notice, published rates only. No manual fee may be charged without written policy basis. Naomi had typed that line herself at 6:40 in the morning. Her hands had shaken when she pinned it up. Then the first fisherman saw it and nodded. That was when she understood that policy could have weight when it was finally placed where people could see it. Elaine opened the review summary. By the end of the first day, we have 68 customer records, 43 fee irregularities, 29 manual cancellations, 18 displaced local vessels, 9 Harbor Patrol referrals without sufficient booking basis, and 1 attempted deletion after preservation began. Victoria Shaw looked tired. "This is worse than I expected," Samuel said. "It is not worse than it was. It is only written down now." No one argued. Malcolm looked through the window toward the old pier. "Then we keep writing." Gerald Whitmore did not return to the marina that morning. His attorney sent a statement claiming the suspension was rushed, the records lacked context, and the review was being driven by a powerful buyer who wanted a symbolic victory. Elaine read the statement aloud. When she finished, Malcolm said, "He still thinks this is about me." Samuel leaned back. "Men like that always do. They make the wound, then they act offended when someone names the knife." The formal investigation took 6 weeks. It did not rely on anger. It relied on documents. Booking logs showed that customers marked "not marina profile" were canceled or moved at a higher rate than other customers. Fee ledgers showed unpublished charges applied mostly to new owners, local fishermen, and customers with names Gerald did not recognize. Fuel records showed favored clients receiving priority service, while working vessels waited outside posted rules. Dock assignment history showed premium slips being held for Gerald preferred clients, while paid reservations were moved. Harbor Patrol notes showed that Gerald had repeatedly framed verified customers as trespass risks after they challenged extra fees or relocation orders. The side list tied it all together. Good family, yacht club known, premium appearance, donor-friendly, not marina profile, working dock only, check ownership twice, image issue. Those phrases became the structure of the case. Gerald had thought vague words would protect him. They identified him. At his final review hearing, Gerald sat across from the Port Authority panel, Pierce Harbor Group counsel, and an independent maritime operations examiner. He no longer wore a marina radio. He no longer carried the office keys. His access card had already been disabled. Victoria Shaw asked him one direct question. Would you have treated Malcolm Pierce differently if you had known he was the controlling officer of Pierce Harbor Group? Gerald looked at his attorney. The attorney said nothing. Gerald answered carefully. Of course I would have approached the matter with greater care. Malcolm looked down at the rope bracelet on his wrist. There it was again. The same truth in a cleaner suit. Greater care for power, less care for everyone else. The independent examiner wrote the sentence into the record. Victoria asked another question. Should verified customers receive different levels of respect based on whether the manager recognizes their status? Gerald said, "That is not what I meant." Elaine replied, "The records show what you meant in practice." The panel reviewed the evidence for 90 minutes. When the decision came, it came without drama. Gerald Whitmore was terminated from all Crescent Bay Marina operations. His eligibility to manage any Port Authority concession was suspended pending further review. His conduct was referred to the City Contract Integrity Office for potential civil action related to unpublished fees and false reporting. Assistant Manager Carl Benson was suspended for attempting to delete preserved records. The marina accounting vendor was ordered to produce a full export of fee collections for the previous 3 years. Gerald asked if he could retrieve personal items from his office. Victoria said yes, under supervision. That was the last privilege he received at Crescent Bay. He walked through the marina at 4:10 that afternoon with a cardboard box in his arms. The restaurant guests did not applaud. The fishermen did not cheer. The dockhands did not laugh. They watched. Quietly. That was worse for him. The silence did not humiliate him the way he had humiliated others. It measured him. At the service shed, Samuel Reed stood beside a young mechanic fixing a fuel line. Gerald passed without looking at him. Samuel did not call after him. Some people deserve consequence, not farewell. The second phase of the reckoning began the next day. Pierce Harbor Group announced a customer remediation review. Every unpublished fee tied to premium access adjustment, ownership verification service fee, seasonal access surcharge, or manual dock access charge would be reviewed. If unsupported by the published tariff, it would be refunded with interest. Every canceled reservation marked not Marina profile or image issue would be reviewed. If the cancellation violated booking policy, the customer would receive refund credit or restored access. Every fishing vessel displaced during a valid local access term would be offered a corrected dock position or compensation for lost access. Every harbor patrol referral made by Marina management would be audited for evidence. Naomi expected anger. It came. A lot of it. People brought receipts with folded corners and years of resentment. Some raised their voices. Some cried. Some said they had stopped coming to Crescent Bay because the place made them feel like intruders near their own water. Naomi listened. When she had to say the marina had failed them, she did not soften it. You were charged a fee that was not in the public schedule. Your reservation was canceled without valid basis. Your vessel was moved under a code that should not have existed. Your complaint was closed without review. The truth sounded harsh, but for the people hearing it, harsh truth was better than polished denial. One afternoon, Denise Alvarez stood at the counter after receiving her corrected access notice. She looked at Naomi. I thought I had done something wrong. Naomi shook her head. You did not. Denise pressed the paper to her chest. I sold my first boat because of this place. I thought maybe people like me were not meant for these slips. Naomi had no practiced answer, so she gave an honest one. I am sorry we helped make you feel that. Denise nodded. Then she looked toward the water. I want my next booking in spring. Naomi smiled for the first time that week. We will be ready. Samuel Reed became harbor safety advisor before he ever accepted the title. He inspected cleats, fuel lines, dock edges, emergency ladders, and work zones. He pointed out where luxury upgrades had hidden basic maintenance problems. He showed the transition team which ladders rusted after storms and which dock lights failed in fog. A young consultant asked why those issues had not been reported earlier. Samuel laughed once. They were. Reports sink fast when the person reading them only cares how the deck looks from the restaurant. The consultant wrote that down. Samuel stopped him. Do not write it as a quote unless you understand it. The consultant looked embarrassed. Samuel continued. Write this. Safety cannot be cosmetic. That became part of the new operating manual. Malcolm visited the harbor every week during the transition. He did not sit in Gerald's office. He walked. Main dock, fuel dock, repair yard, old fishing pier, cargo lane, market road. He spoke to people who had never been invited into marina planning, fish sellers, dock hands, cleaning crews, mechanics, boat owners with small vessels, sailing instructors, restaurant staff, harbor patrol officers, families who used the public walkway because they could not afford a boat but still loved the water. Each person knew a piece of the port that the old management had ignored. Malcolm listened because his father had taught him that a harbor is never one view, it is many hands. 3 months later, Crescent Bay posted its new rules at every entrance. Every vessel is checked by record. Every fee must be published. Every denial must include written policy basis. Every safety decision must be documented. Every worker may report pressure without retaliation. Every person will be met with respect. No one called the sign beautiful. That was not its job. Its job was to be clear. Naomi was appointed permanent Marina operations director after the independent review confirmed that she had preserved the key records and cooperated fully, but also showed that she had followed improper instructions before speaking up. Malcolm insisted that the appointment include training, supervision, and a public acknowledgement of responsibility. Naomi accepted all of it. At the staff meeting, she stood in front of the dock team and said, "I am not getting this role because I was perfect. I am getting it because I helped expose what was wrong and because I am willing to build something cleaner than what I helped run." No one clapped at first. Then the young fuel attendant did. Samuel followed. Soon the room joined, not because Naomi was absolved, because accountability had finally become part of promotion. Pierce Harbor Group created the Harbor Access Fund that winter. It did not buy yachts for people. Malcolm refused anything that turned dignity into a publicity stunt. The fund paid for safety training, marine trade apprenticeships, small vessel maintenance grants, transparent booking support for new boat owners, and legal help for customers challenging improper marina fees. Samuel helped design the apprenticeship program. The first class met in the repaired service shed. There were 12 students. Some were children of fishermen. Some were community college students. Some were dockhands who wanted licenses. One boy named Andre stood beside an engine block and asked Malcolm, "Can someone like me really run a port one day?" Malcolm looked at him for a long moment. "Someone like you can repair a boat, own a boat, design a boat, captain a boat, manage a port, or build something larger than the port." Andre grinned. Samuel handed him a wrench. "Start by learning why this bolt matters." That was the lesson Malcolm loved most. Dreams needed doors, but they also needed tools. 6 months after Gerald removal, the old premium lounge changed. It was still clean, still comfortable, still used by yacht owners. But on weekday mornings, it opened to harbor workers, apprentices, sailing students, and local families attending marine safety classes. The restaurant complained at first. Then the classes brought business. The fishermen brought fresh catch. The sailing cooperative brought families. The place became less exclusive and more alive. One of Gerald's old preferred clients wrote a complaint. "Crescent Bay no longer feels elite." Victoria Shaw forwarded it to Malcolm with no comment. Malcolm replied with one sentence: "Good." A year after the incident at Slip A1, Crescent Bay Port held its first public harbor day. There were polished yachts and small fishing boats in the same program. Children learned knots from mechanics. Visitors toured the fuel dock safety station. Local fishermen sold seafood beside the waterfront restaurant. The sailing cooperative launched boats from a slip it had once been denied. Denise Alvarez arrived in her restored sailboat and docked without being asked for anything beyond the standard record. Naomi greeted her. "Welcome back." Denise looked around. "It feels different." Naomi nodded. "It is." Near the service shed, Samuel stood with Malcolm, watching 2 apprentices try to tie a bowline. One tied it wrong. The other laughed. Samuel made them untie both and start again. Malcolm smiled. "You are hard on them." Samuel said, "A bad knot does not care about confidence." Malcolm looked at the rope bracelet on his wrist. "My father used to say something close to that." Samuel became quiet. Joseph would have liked this. Malcolm looked across the harbor. Would he? Samuel nodded. He would have pretended not to. Then he would have walked the whole dock and checked every cleat. Malcolm laughed softly. That sounds right. After a moment, Samuel said, he would not believe his son bought the port. Malcolm watched the water move under the dock. I do not think he wanted me to buy it. Samuel looked at him. What did he want? Malcolm touched the old rope. To walk it without being made invisible. Samuel nodded slowly. Then give him that. That afternoon, Malcolm walked alone to Slip a One. The Miriam Grace rested there, dark blue against the bright water. He stepped aboard and placed one hand on the rail. His mother name gleamed near the stern. Miriam Grace Pierce had never owned a yacht. She had owned a scale at the fish market, a notebook of customers who paid late, and a voice that could cut through any dishonest bargain. Joseph Pierce had never owned a Marina. He had owned tools, calloused hands, and a way of tying knots that held through storms. Their son owned the port now, but ownership was not the ending, it was the responsibility. A small voice came from the dock. Mr. Pierce? Malcolm turned. Andre, the apprentice, stood near the cleat with a younger boy beside him. My cousin wants to ask you something. The younger boy looked nervous. He could not have been more than 9. Malcolm stepped down to the dock. What is your name? Marcus. The boy pointed at the Miriam Grace. Can people like us have boats like that? The question hit the place Gerald insult had bruised. People like you do not own yachts. Malcolm crouched so he and the boy were eye level. People like us can own boats, repair boats, captain boats, design boats, run ports, write the rules, and change rules that should never have existed. The boy looked at the water. Really? Malcolm nodded. But first, you learn to respect the water. It carries everyone, but it forgives nobody who gets careless. Andre handed the boy a short piece of rope. Samuel called from the service shed. Teach him the bowline first. The boy smiled. Malcolm watched Andre begin the lesson. Loop, turn, back through, pull clean. The knot held. That was the image Malcolm carried with him after the harbor day ended. Not Gerald leaving with a cardboard box. Not the Port Authority vote. Not the news stories about discrimination at a luxury marina. A child learning a knot on a dock where, 1 year earlier, a man had tried to decide who belonged by looking at a face. That was justice with roots. Gerald Whitmore had thought he was protecting the prestige of Crescent Bay when he told Malcolm Pierce that people like him did not own yachts. He believed ownership had a look. He believed the marina was a stage for familiar wealth, not a working harbor built by many hands. He believed a false report, a safety excuse, and a manager's signature could turn prejudice into policy. But the records told the truth. The booking was valid. The ownership was verified. The fees were unlawful. The side list was real. The deletion attempt was blocked. The Port Authority contract was clear, and the man Gerald tried to remove from Slip A1 controlled the port beneath his feet. Malcolm did not use that power to close the harbor in anger. He used it to open the books. He used it to return money. He used it to protect workers. He used it to bring fishermen back toward the water. He used it to teach a marina that standards mean nothing if they are only fences for pride. On the anniversary of the transition, a new sign stood at the entrance to Crescent Bay. Every vessel is checked by record. Every person is met with respect. Below it, smaller letters carried a line Malcolm had requested from his father old saying, "The water lifts every boat. People must learn to do the same." Malcolm stood beneath that sign at sunrise with Samuel beside him. Fishing boats moved out first, then a sailboat, then a yacht,
then a fuel barge toward the work pier. The harbor did not rank them by beauty. It carried them all. Samuel looked at Malcolm. "Your father would have checked that sign for loose bolts." Malcolm smiled. "Then let us check them." They did, together.
And when the first guests of the morning walked through Crescent Bay, nobody asked whether they looked like they belonged before reading the record. Nobody turned labor into shame. Nobody charged respect as an extra fee. The gate on the water had not vanished. Gates still existed. Safety required some. Operations required some. But the invisible gate Gerald had built from status, race, money, and fear had been taken down plank by plank. And every time a new owner tied a line at Crescent Bay, every time a fisherman kept the slip he had paid for, every time a dockhand corrected a rule without fearing retaliation, the harbor answered Gerald's insult with something stronger than revenge. Proof. People like Malcolm did own yachts. People like Samuel did hold the harbor together. People like Naomi could tell the truth and still have a future. People like the children on the dock could dream beyond the gate. And the port belonged at last not to the man who guarded appearances, but to the record, the work, the water, and the people who had earned the right to stand there.